There's an assumption almost everyone takes for granted, that humans were built for one partner, that monogamy is ancient, natural, practically written into our biology. But the anthropologists who actually lived alongside the oldest surviving hunter-gatherer groups kept finding the same thing. The rules we treat as timeless were invented far later than we think. Ancient humans had multiple partners, not as an exception, as the norm. The Hadza of northern Tanzania are one of the last groups still living by hunting and gathering, the way all humans lived for the vast majority of our existence. When researchers spent years living among them in the late 20th century, they noticed something that quietly dismantled every romantic assumption. Long-term monogamy was not the default. A man and a woman would form a bond, have children together, and then drift apart. One or both would move on to someone new. New partnerships would form, then sometimes dissolve again. The Hadza called this serial monogamy, and nobody in the group seemed particularly troubled by it. It was not a failure. It was simply how human life worked when there were no laws or institutions to force it in any other direction. The Kung people of the Kalahari Desert showed a similar pattern. Anthropologist Marjorie Shostak spent years with them in the 1970s, recording the life story of a woman named Nisa. Nisa had been married multiple times, had loved multiple men at different points in her life, and sometimes maintained connections with former partners even while in a new relationship. When Shostak asked whether she thought that was wrong, Nisa looked at her as if the question made no sense. For the Kung, having strong feelings for more than one person was not shameful. It was simply part of being alive. When geneticists started examining ancient DNA extracted from burial sites across Europe and Central Asia, dating back 10 to 15,000 years, they expected to find clear evidence of permanent pair bonds. What they found was more complicated. Adults buried together often showed no genetic relationship to the children buried near them. Multiple individuals at the same site would share ancestry in ways that suggested fluid partnerships rather than exclusive ones. The picture that emerged was not two people devoted to each other for life. It was something more like a dense web of overlapping relationships within a community, where children were raised collectively. And partnerships were real, but not necessarily permanent. There is a pattern researchers noticed across dozens of hunter-gatherer societies studied during the 20th century. In groups where food was unpredictable and scarce, and both parents were absolutely needed just to keep children alive, pair bonds tended to be stronger and longer-lasting. But in groups where the community as a whole pooled and shared resources broadly, strict monogamy was far less common. This suggests that what we think of as natural loyalty may actually have been a practical response to scarcity, not a built-in feature of human nature. Our two closest animal relatives tell a relevant story. Chimpanzees and bonobos are genetically the closest species to humans on Earth. Both live in multi-male, multi-female groups. Both have fluid mating patterns with no lasting exclusive pairs. Neither species forms the kind of permanent romantic pair we now idealize as the natural human state. Humans sit somewhere between these two models, capable of forming deep and lasting bonds with a specific person, but also biologically wired in ways that overlap with our primate relatives. The fact that we fall in the middle rather than at either extreme suggests we have the capacity for both, and that environment and circumstance determine which way we lean. The shift towards stricter, institutionalized monogamy appears to have begun roughly 10,000 years ago, with the rise of agriculture. Before farming, nobody accumulated much. You ate what you caught or gathered, and if you had more than you needed, you shared it. But when humans began farming, they accumulated land, livestock, and stored food for the first time. Suddenly, there was property worth inheriting. And for a man to be certain that his accumulated wealth went to his own biological children rather than to someone else's, he needed to know with certainty who his children were. That certainty required controlling his partner. Anthropologists argue that monogamy as a social and moral rule was not a discovery of some natural human truth. It was a political invention, designed first and foremost to protect inherited property. Some people respond to all of this by pointing to jealousy. If ancient humans had multiple partners without concern, why do we feel such intense pain at betrayal? The argument is that jealousy proves we were built for exclusivity. But evolutionary psychologists offer a different reading. Jealousy is not proof that humans were designed to have only one partner. It is proof that humans form primary bonds that feel uniquely important. Even in cultures where secondary relationships are accepted, the main bond tends to be the most emotionally significant. Jealousy protects that bond. It does not define the outer limit of human capacity for connection. What we are left with is a species that does not fit cleanly into any category. We form bonds that can be extraordinarily deep and loyal. We also experience desires that complicate those bonds. We can sustain relationships for a lifetime, and we also produce among the highest rates of partnership breakdown of any pair bonding species ever studied. The data is not a contradiction. It is an honest portrait of what we actually are. Ancient humans were loyal, not in the way we tend to imagine, not loyal to the idea of exclusive romantic partnership enforced by ritual and law. They were loyal to their children, to the people they depended on for survival, to the bonds that kept them and their group alive. The romantic exclusivity we now treat as the natural baseline of human decency came much later, attached to farming, property, and the need to control inheritance. What was always there from the very beginning was the bond itself. Two people, sometimes more, choosing each other in a world that had not yet decided to make a rule about it.